injured in the snow during a blizzard. The defendant denies these allegations. She is presumed to be innocent and has pled not guilty. The defendant is charged with second-degree murder. She is also charged with manslaughter while operating under the influence and with leaving the scene after causing personal injury or death. I will describe these crimes in greater detail at the end of the case when I teach you the law. But briefly, murder is the unlawful killing of a human being. There are various ways in which the Commonwealth can prove a murder case, and the Commonwealth is permitted to proceed under all theories it believes it can prove. Here, the Commonwealth alleges that Ms. Reed committed murder and that that murder was murder in the second degree. In order to prove the defendant guilty of second-degree murder, the Commonwealth must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed an unlawful killing and that it was done in malice. In comparison, involuntary manslaughter is an unintentional, unlawful killing caused by wanton or reckless conduct. These terms and the elements of the crimes will be explained to you in greater detail at the end of the case before you begin your deliberations. Now, at the outset, I would like to address the issue of public interest in this case and the duty of this court to adhere to the rule of law. John Adams said that we are a government of laws, not of men, and that the law must be deaf to the clamoring of the public. He meant that while public opinion about a given subject may ebb and flow, the law must be steady, reliable, and even-handed. We know that on the subject of this case, there are people advocating for one outcome or another with intensity, but without the benefit of having heard or seen any evidence in this case at all. The law works in a different way, and the difference is crucial to our system of justice. The jurors selected for this trial will hear and judge the evidence. They will decide what the facts are, and where the evidence is contested, they will determine where the truth lies. Ultimately, the jury will decide whether the Commonwealth has carried its burden of proving that the defendant is guilty of any crime beyond a reasonable doubt. People outside of this building have rights, and we know that they have voices, but this criminal trial will be decided by an independent jury, free from outside interference, based only upon the evidence presented in this courtroom and the law. This is the only way to ensure that every person who comes before the court receives a fair trial. It is just that simple and that important. So, while public comment will likely continue, the rule of law will be upheld. Now, in order to determine your eligibility to serve on this case, I'm going to ask you questions as a group, and then I'm going to see each one of you at sidebar after you fill out a supplemental questionnaire. We have found that the use of this questionnaire is helpful for several reasons. First, there are some personal questions on it, and we ask that you be candid. In addition, the process of filling out the questionnaire provides the opportunity to be more reflective as you answer the questions, rather than being put on the spot and asked to give immediate answers. After you fill out the questionnaire, we will have you come up to sidebar one at a time so that we can follow up with you on your answers to the questionnaire and to my questions. I want to thank you in advance for your patience as we go through this process. As you may know, for the parties participate in the selection of the jury. Under our law, each of the parties has the right to exercise what we call juror challenges. This means that each party has the right to challenge a certain number of prospective jurors for any reason or no reason at all. And for now, that number is 16 challenges. Therefore, some of you may be excused during the impanelment procedure. If you are not selected for jury service on this case, you should not take it personally. Don't think that somehow you're not a fair person. It's not a reflection on you at all. You will be directed back to the jury room and perhaps be picked for another case. In a little while, I'll pose a number of questions to you as a group. You have taken an oath that requires you to truthfully answer these questions and all questions posed to you. If your answer is yes to any of the questions that I ask, I will ask you to raise your hand and hold up your juror card in the air with the numbers facing out so the court officer can read your number for the card. You don't need to take those cards out yet. We'll let you know when you need to take those cards out. The fact that you answer yes to one or more of my questions does not mean that you're automatically disqualified from jury service. It simply means that there are matters that the lawyers and I need to discuss with you at sidebar. If you find a question posed to the group overly intrusive, you may elect to answer that question at sidebar. I may have additional questions for you which relate to issues that may be raised in the trial and are designed to give us information regarding your ability to serve as a fair and impartial juror in this case, and the lawyers are permitted to ask you questions for the same purpose. This is not a test. There is no right or wrong answer. We're simply looking for your best and most honest answer to the questions. So at this point, I'm going to ask the lawyers to introduce you to themselves, and I'm going to ask that the defense counsel introduce their client. Starting with the Commonwealth, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hank Brennan. I have the privilege of representing the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Along with me in this case, there are two other attorneys. I'd like to introduce both of them. My far right is Attorney Laura McLaughlin. And beside me is Attorney Adam Lally.
Thank you. For the defendant, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alan Jackson, and I have the honor and privilege of representing Ms. Karen Reed, who's standing to my right.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Elizabeth Little, and I have the privilege of representing Ms. Reed as well.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Robert Alessi, and I also have the privilege of representing Ms. Reed.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Yannetti. I'm an attorney. I have offices in Boston and right here in Dedham. My pleasure to represent Karen Reed.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Victoria George, and I also have the honor of representing Ms. Reed.
Good morning, I'm Karen Reed. Thank you for being here.
Good morning.
All right. Thank you very much. So I'm going to read the witness list to you folks. It's very long. It does not mean that all of these people will be called as jurors, but you may hear the names of some of these people during the testimony. So it's important that you listen and think about whether or not you know these folks, because you will be asked that question in a little while. The list is alphabetical, but it's alphabetical by first name. Aidan Kearney from Jefferson, Massachusetts. Isaac Wolf, Dr. Isaac Wolf from South Miami, Florida. Alfred Lopalato from Canton. Allison McCabe, also from Canton. Andre Porto from the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab. Andrew Klain, Bridgewater. Andrew Renchler, PhD, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Angela Malvone from Canton. Annie Chung, also Canton. Anthony Flamati from the Canton Fire Department. Ashley Bell, Canton. Ashley Valaire, State Police Crime Lab. Brian Albert, Norton. Brian Albert Jr., Norwood. Brian Albert Jr., Boston. Brian Higgins, Sandwich. Brian Loughran, Canton. Brian Wanless, retired from the Canton Police Department. Bridget Meehan, keeper of the records from Canton. Caitlin Albert, Easton. Lieutenant Charles Ray of the Canton Police Department. The chief of the Canton Police Department, Helena Rafferty. Chris Van E., PhD, from Novi, Michigan. Christina Hanley, Mass State Police. Christopher Albert, Canton. Christopher Curran, Canton. Colleen Crawford from the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office. Colin Albert, Canton. Courtney Proctor, Canton. Kurt Roberts, Canton. Daniel Whitley, Canton Fire Department. Daniel Wolf, PhD, from Penns Park, Pennsylvania. Derek Ellington from Wake Forest, North Carolina. Dr. Marie Russell from Los Angeles. Dr. Elizabeth LaPosada from Providence, Rhode Island. Elizabeth Proctor from Canton. Eric Hanlon, Canton. Erin Beatty, Canton. Erin O'Keefe, West Bridgewater. Francis Walsh, Canton Fire Department. Garrett Wing, Green Cove Springs, Florida. Gary Fowler from Brockton, George Woodbury, Canton Fire Department, Gretchen Voss from Boston, Hannah Knowles, the State Police Crime Lab, Heather Maxon, Walpole, Arabito Hernandez from the Boston Police Department, Holly Price, Mountain View, California, Ian Whiffen, Vienna, Virginia, Dr. Scordy Bello from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Boston, James Crosby, PhD from Jacksonville, Florida, Jason Becker, Canton Fire Department, Jean DeMoulis, Canton, Mass., Jennifer McCabe, also Canton, Jessica Hyde from Bridgeport, New York, John O'Keefe Sr. from Braintree, Judson Welcher, PhD from a company called Aperture LLC, Julie Albert, Canton, Julie Nagel, Canton, Justin Rice, Dr. Justin Rice from South Weymouth, 2 juveniles, one whose initials are KF and the other whose initials are PF, and they're both from Canton. Caitlin Boudreau from Raynham, Karina Kolakithas from Canton, Katie Camerano, Canton, Katie McLaughlin, Canton Fire Department, Keeper of the Records for Ring from Hawthorne, California, Kerry Roberts, Canton, Curran, Canton, Kevin Albert, Canton, Kevin O'Hara from Mass State Police, Lance Mello, Mass State Police Crime Lab, Laura Sullivan from Pembroke, Laurie Cahill from Worcester, Leslie Pearlstein from Canton, Lieutenant Michael Lank from the Canton Police Department, Louis Jutras from Canton, Lieutenant Brian Tully, Mass State Police, Lieutenant John Fanning, Mass State Police, Lieutenant Paul Gallagher, Canton Police Department, Maggie Gaffney from Bonita Springs, Florida, Mark Lopolato from Canton, Margaret O'Keefe, Canton, Marietta Sullivan from Pembroke, Mary Souza from Dighton, Mass., Matthew Amory from Canton, Matthew DeSogra from Charlotte, North Carolina, Matthew Erickson, Grosse Pointe Farms, Michigan, Matthew Kelly, Canton Fire Department, Matthew Kelch from the FBI, Matthew McCabe, Canton, Maureen Harnett, the Mass State Police Crime Lab, Megan Mariani from New York, New York, Michael Camerano from Canton, Mass., Michael Easter, Los Angeles, Michael Trotter from the Canton Public Works Department, Michael Wagner from Foxborough, Mike Maroli from Bridgewater, Mike Rushworth from Thompson Station, Tennessee, Natalie Wyweek Berschneider from San Marino, California, Nathan Reed from Raynham, Mass., Nicholas Bradford from Lorton, Virginia, Nicholas Curran from West Roxbury, Nicholas Kolakithas from Canton, Nicole Albert from Norwood, Norfolk County District Attorney Michael Morrissey, Officer Kelly Deaver, Boston Police Department, Officer Nicholas Barrows from the Dighton Police Department, Patrick Haggerty from Somerset, Paul Mikowski from Melrose, Paul O'Keefe from Canton, Rebecca Bison, Canton, Rebecca Trayers from Norfolk, Mass., Dr. Renee Stonebridge from the Office of Chief Medical Examiner, Boston, Richard Green from South Beach, Florida, Richard Donatino from Canton, Robert Gilman from Hull, Ryan Nagel from Canton, Sarah Levinson from Canton, Sergeant Brian Gallerini from the Needham Police Department, Sergeant Sean Good, Canton Police Department, Sergeant Paul Giampetro, Canton Police Department, Sergeant Yuri Buchanan from the Massachusetts State Police, Shannon Burgess from South Lake, Texas, Cheryl Waugh from Canton, Sophie Herzon from the Mass State Police Crime Lab, Stephanie Devlin, also from the State Police Crime Lab, Stephen Mullaney, Canton Police Department, Stephen Nelson from the Norfolk County DA's office, Stephen Bernstein, who is a keeper of the records from Stoughton, Stephen Ridge from the Boston Police Department, Stephen Saraf from the Canton Police Department, Stephen Scanlon from West Roxbury, Terry Kuhn from Davis, California, Tess Chart from Lorton, Virginia, Thomas Beatty from Canton, Thomas Kelleher from Canton, Thomas Martin from Weymouth, Thomas Nuttall from the Canton Fire Department, Tristan Morris from Easton, Mass., The following are state troopers: Trooper Connor Keefe, Trooper David DeChico, Trooper Evan Brent, Trooper Jeffrey Kostowski, Trooper Joseph Paul, Trooper Kathleen Prince, Trooper Michael Proctor, Trooper Nicholas Garino, Trooper Zachary Clark. Wendell Robery from Canton, and William Reed from North Dayton, Mass. Those are the list of witnesses. Now, as you can imagine, there are a lot of witnesses. This case is going to take a long time to try. We're in the process of impaneling a jury. We expect that that also will take a while. I'm told by the lawyers that their best estimate of how long the evidence will take will be 6 to 8 weeks. We can't tell you exactly when the case will start. We can give you an idea, and we will keep you posted as the impanelment process goes on as to when the case will start. But 6 to 8 weeks, and it will go from 9 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There'll be a few days in there that we won't be in session, and there'll be a few more half days that will just go morning. So we realize it's a long time, and we realize it's a lot to ask of you folks. But that will be the schedule. The daily schedule will be, we'll start at 9 in the morning. We'll take a 15 or 20-minute recess around 11 o'clock. We'll break for lunch at 1 o'clock, and lunch will be brought into you every day. We usually would like to think about having abbreviated lunches where jurors are having their lunch in the courtroom so that we can get as much testimony in a day as possible, so that hopefully it will be shorter than the 8 weeks. That's our intent at this time, and that's the best estimate. It's a good faith estimate. Sometimes trials go longer and sometimes they're shorter. And we do our best. Once we know, every day at the end of the day, I will tell you if we are on track for finishing on schedule, or if we're a little ahead of schedule, or if we're a little behind. And I can tell you, I don't think I've ever had to say to a jury that we're behind schedule. So that's our goal. Now, it might help if I give you a preview about some basic law that applies to criminal cases like this. It's my job to teach the jury the law, and I don't do that completely until the end of the trial. So for now, I will give you a very brief summary of some of the legal principles that will govern this trial. First, and most basically, the defendant starts this trial presumed to be innocent. The fact that Ms. Reed was arrested or that she was indicted is not proof of anything. An indictment is simply a piece of paper. It just makes an accusation. An indictment is merely a formal manner of accusing a person of a crime in order to bring her to trial in the superior court. But it is only the jury, in other words, you folks, who can decide whether the prosecution has proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt. If the Commonwealth does not do that, then the presumption of innocence requires you to find the defendant not guilty. The law does not require a defendant to prove her innocence, to produce any evidence whatsoever, or to do anything other than attend the trial. Defendant has every right to just sit in that chair and say, you accuse me, now you prove it, and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant until you, the jury, make your determination after listening and considering all the evidence. Another important principle of law is that the defendant has an absolute right not to testify, and I just talked a little bit about that. And that's because the entire burden of proof in this case is on the Commonwealth to prove she's guilty. A defendant's decision whether or not to testify has nothing to do with the question of whether she is guilty or not guilty. The jury must not consider it in any way or even discuss it in their deliberations. Jurors in a criminal case must determine whether the Commonwealth has proved its case against the defendant beyond a reasonable doubt based solely on the testimony of the witnesses and the exhibits. That brings me to the requirement of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. What is proof beyond a reasonable doubt? The term is often used and probably pretty well understood, though it is not easily defined. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt does not mean proof beyond all possible doubt. For everything in the lives of human beings is open to some possible or imaginary doubt. A charge is proved beyond a reasonable doubt if, after you have compared and considered all of the evidence, you have in your minds an abiding conviction to a moral certainty that the charge is true. When we refer to moral certainty, we mean the highest degree of certainty possible in matters relating to human affairs, based solely on the evidence that has been put before you in this case. I have told you that every person is presumed to be innocent unless and until he or she is proved guilty, and that the burden of proof is on the Commonwealth. If you evaluate all the evidence and you still have a reasonable doubt remaining, the defendant is entitled to the benefit of that doubt and must be acquitted. It is not enough for the Commonwealth to establish a probability, even a strong probability, that the defendant is more likely to be guilty than not guilty. That is not enough. Instead, the evidence must convince you of the defendant's guilt to a reasonable and moral certainty, a certainty that convinces your understanding and satisfies your reason and judgment as jurors who are sworn to act conscientiously on the evidence. This is what we mean by proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Our system of justice depends on judges like me and jurors like you being able and willing to make careful and fair decisions. All people deserve fair and equal treatment in our system of justice, regardless of their race, national origin, religion, age, ability, gender, sexual orientation, education, income level, or any other personal characteristic. You have agreed to be fair, and I am sure that you want to be fair, but that is not always easy. One difficulty comes from our own built-in expectations and assumptions. They exist even if we're not aware of them, and even if we believe we do not have them. Some of you may have heard this called implicit bias, and that is what I'm talking about. Now, of course, we judges have the same problem as everyone else, so let me share a few strategies that we have found useful. First, slow down. Do not rush to a decision. Hasty decisions are more likely to reflect stereotypes or hidden biases. Second, keep an open mind. Avoid drawing conclusions until the end of the case when you and your fellow jurors deliberate. Remember that when you deliberate, you will have all the evidence and all the time you need to make a careful decision. So there truly is no need to start making your mind up before then. Third, you should listen closely to all the witnesses. That is the best way to ensure that you decide this case based on the evidence and the law instead of upon unsupported assumptions. Fourth, as you listen to the testimony about the people involved in this case, consider them as individuals rather than as members of a particular group. And finally, I might ask myself, would I view the evidence differently if the people were from different groups, such as different racial, ethnic, or gender identity groups? At the end of the case, I will remind you of these strategies and ask you to focus on the evidence instead of any unsupported assumptions you may have. All we ask is that you, individually and as a group, do your best to resolve this case based upon the evidence and the law without sympathy, bias, or prejudice, to the best of your ability as human beings. Now, I know that some of this might be confusing, and perhaps all of it's confusing at this early stage of the case. You'll certainly be in a better position to understand this at the end of the case when you've heard the evidence and I can explain the law to you in detail. So don't be worried if you didn't catch everything I said. Why am I telling you these things? Because we need to know if you are able to follow the law in this case. You don't necessarily have to agree with the law, but all jurors will have to apply the law as I describe it. So for jury selection, it's important to know if you might have some doubts whether you can accept and follow these legal rules. I'm now going to ask you several questions, so if your answer is yes, please raise your hand. So now you can take out those juror cards. But before we begin, I understand that sometimes jurors do not fill out their juror questionnaires completely, that sometimes we're in a rush to send them in, or we don't think that our situation applies to the question that's being asked. So if there's something on your form that's not filled in, like your age or prior work experience, we'll ask you. But it's also the time, if you're thinking about it, maybe you did not include any prior involvement with the court system, either as a juror or a witness or a party to some litigation. So if there's something that you know is missing from this form, please just let us know that at sidebar, right? So the first question is, do you or a close personal friend or family member know, or have you had any prior dealings with the witnesses whose names I've called?
Juror number 168, 168. Juror 167, 167. Juror 257, 257. Juror 202, 202. Juror 212, 212. And juror number 259, 259.
Thank you. Do any of you folks or a close personal friend or family know, or have you had any prior dealings with the lawyers in this case or the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office? I see no. Okay.
Juror number 200, 200.
Okay. Thank you. Do any of you folks or a close personal friend or family member have any financial or other personal interest whatsoever in this case or its outcome? I see no affirmative responses. Could you raise your hand, please, if you have seen, heard, or talked about this case?
Juror number 246, 246. Juror number 168, 168. Juror 182, 182. Juror number 262, 262. Juror 196, 196. Juror 245, 245. Juror 219, 219.
Juror 232, 30. Juror 171, 171. Juror 241, 241. Juror 195, 195. Juror 256, 256. Juror 257. Juror 227. Juror 198. Juror 268. Juror 166. Juror 164. Juror 213. Juror 271.
Juror 190, 190. Juror 253, 253. Juror 222, 222. Juror 240, 240. Juror 193, 193.
Juror 184. Juror 210. Juror 239. Juror 167. Juror 189. Juror 199. Juror 202. Juror 177. Juror 263. Juror 180.
Juror 172, 172. Juror 223, 223. Juror 273, 273. Juror 179, 179. Juror 204, 204. Juror 242, 242. Juror 178, 178. Juror 197, 197. Juror 244, 244. Juror 187, 187. Juror 212, 212. Juror 162, 162. Juror 260, 260. Juror 160, 160.
Juror 216. Juror 175. Juror 186. Juror 267. Juror 208. Juror 237. Juror 211. Juror 220. Juror 243. There are 229. There are 234. There are 251. There are 217. There are 173. There are 259. There are 200. There are 266. There are 174. There are 218. There are 254. There are 269. And there are 235.
All right, thank you. Could you raise your hand if you've expressed or formed any opinion with respect to this case?
Juror 246, 246. Juror 262, 262. Juror 196, 196.
Juror 230. Juror 204-5. Juror 166. Juror 164. Juror 198. Juror 227. Juror 167. Juror 239. Juror 210. Juror 184. Juror 177. Juror 263.
Juror 253, 253. Juror 223, 223. Juror 204, 204. Juror 178, 178. Juror 244, 244. Juror 212, 212. Juror 162, 162. Juror 260, 260. Juror 160, 160.
There are 186. There are 208. There are 211. There are 274. There are 183. There are 200. There are 259. There are 217. There are 234. There are 229. There are 218. There are 254. There are 269. And juror 235.
All right, thank you. Are any of you folks aware of any bias or prejudice that you may have in regard to this case or in favor of or against either of the parties? Please raise your hand if that's so. Are any of you aware of any bias or prejudice that you may have in regard to this case or in favor of or against either of the parties?
Juror 232.
Juror 200, 2202. Juror 160, 160. 260, 260. Juror 223, 223. Juror 204, 204. 178, 178.
Juror 208. Juror 229. Juror 217. Juror 259. Juror 218. Juror 254. And juror 269.
Okay. Thank you. Do any of you folks have any difficulty hearing or any problem with understanding the English language, any physical or mental condition, or any religious or philosophical beliefs that would interfere with your ability to hear the evidence in this case, to understand the evidence, to concentrate during the trial, or to deliberate for the purpose of reaching a verdict? Please raise your hand if you do.
Juror 239 and 202.
Juror 223, 223. Juror 206, 206. Juror 178, 178. Juror 165, 165. Juror 272, 272.
Juror 208. Juror 259. Juror 180. 180.
Okay, thank you. Would you raise your hand if you have any difficulty or believe you'd have any difficulty following the important constitutional concepts that I've described? First, that the burden of proof rests entirely with the Commonwealth. Second, that burden of proof is proof beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. And third, that the defendant has absolutely no burden of proof. She can sit there and remain silent. She doesn't have to do a thing. Please raise your hand if you have difficulty with any of those concepts. I see no affirmative responses. I can tell you folks that I talk to jurors after every trial, and they always tell me that they have found their jury experience to be not only an interesting one, but many jurors tell me that their jury experience was a very rewarding one for them. But I do understand that for some people, serving on this jury would cause a substantial hardship. And let me tell you what I mean by that. A substantial hardship means that there's something that's personal to you, such that you would not be able to serve as a juror. And it means that a person sitting next to you or another juror would have to take your place. Now, I ordinarily think of it in terms of you're either a student or you have airline tickets or surgery scheduled during the course of this trial. But I will hear from anyone who believes that they have a substantial hardship in this case. If you think that that's you, please raise your hand.
Juror 246, 246. Juror 169, 169. Juror 271, 271. Juror 240, 240. Juror 193, 193. Juror 164, 164. Juror 219, 219.
Juror 230, 230. Juror 195, 195. Juror 166, 166. Juror 210, 210. Juror 184, Juror 184. Juror 177, 177. Juror 239, 239. Juror 194, 194.
Juror 160, 160. Juror 179, 179. Juror 204, 204. Juror 178, 178. Juror 272, 272. Juror 207, 207. Juror 211, 211.
Juror 267. Juror 186. Juror 248. Juror 274. Juror 183. Juror 192. Juror 228. Juror 229. Juror 217. Juror 173. Juror 259. Juror 266. Juror 218. And Juror 269. Juror 262. Juror 245. Juror 268. And Juror 202.
Okay, thank you. So in a minute or so, I'm going to leave the bench to give you a chance to fill out those supplemental questionnaires that will be given to you. I ask that you not talk to your neighbor or share with any other prospective juror any questions or comments or concerns you might have about jury duty generally, or in this particular case. If you have any questions or concerns, you can bring it to my attention at sidebar. So we'll recess, and the court reporter will recess, and we'll start up again as soon as we can.
All rise to the court, please.
Jimmy.
You're watching WBZ News.
About 1 in 36 children in the U.S. is now identified with autism spectrum disorder, and for many parents, a major concern is what their future looks like into adulthood. On this World Autism Day, Bradley Blackburn takes us to a thriving business where employees with ASD are finding meaningful work.
At a busy t-shirt factory on New York's Long Island, the whirling screen printer is run by Spencer. Social media specialist Kelly captures the moment as Jason is sorting shirts.
I'm ready for my close-up.
They're all employees at Spectrum Designs, and they're all on the autism spectrum.
Me and Spence, just because we're autistic doesn't mean we're not capable.
At this nonprofit business, 65% of employees have ASD. It was co-founded by Patrick Bardsley. He worked at a special needs summer camp and realized the kids he met would need jobs as adults.
Yes, this is a t-shirt company. Yes, we make products and everything else, but it's so much more than that.
The unemployment rate for people with ASD has been estimated at 40% or higher. Kelly struggled to find a job even with a college degree.
I was job interviewing, and within the first 5 minutes, the employer told me, I can't hire you because you don't make eye contact. And that really upset me because I knew everything about the company. I would have been a great employee.
At Spectrum, employees get competitive pay and benefits, and the workplace is inclusive by design. There's a quiet space for breaks without stimulation, clear signage, and a video-based training system.
Ever since we've made these visual changes, we've seen a 30% uptick in our efficiency in the company. And again, this is something that every business can do.
Before you started here, did you have any idea that this is how shirts are printed?
No.
Spencer used to bag groceries at a supermarket. Now he leads a team as a decoration specialist. Kelly has grown Spectrum's Instagram by 100,000 followers.
I'm happy to be autistic. I'm proud to be autistic. And if someone can't accept that, then it's their loss, not mine.
Finding success and fulfillment in a workplace that welcomes all. Bradley Blackburn, CBS News, Port Washington, New York.
Still to come in our next half hour, getting back into the swing of things at Fenway. Details on the Red Sox home opener on Friday. We want to introduce you to this week's Wednesday's child. Isaiah is 11 years old. He loves playing sports like soccer and basketball and following his favorite WWE wrestlers. He also enjoys learning about computer science and playing board games. For more information on Isaiah and the adoption process, head to our website, WBZ.com.
CBS News Boston is now streaming live on our YouTube channel every morning from 7 to 9 a.m. So if you're watching us streaming on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel, CBS News Boston.
Right now on CBS News Boston, a federal judge blocks deportations of Venezuelan migrants. But for those migrants, the damage may be done. Hear from a woman who lost her job because of the uncertainty surrounding immigration. Also, prosecutors say at least 16 people who live in nursing homes were robbed by a caregiver. The woman accused of faking her medical credentials to steal from patients. And the FBI taking action after a series of I-team investigations into stolen land schemes. Why agents say one group is being targeted and why reporting the fraud right away is so important. Welcome back. I'm Brianna Pitts. A reprieve from President Trump's immigration crackdown for some Massachusetts families, but others are still left in limbo. Yesterday, a federal judge in Boston weighed in on another judge's decision to pause the end of temporary protected status for immigrants from Venezuela and Haiti. WBZ's Louisa Moeller spoke with one woman already being affected.
Venezuela was going through a very bad situation. There was no money, there was no food, there was no work, and there was nothing to do there, and I couldn't continue living there.
2 years ago, Anna fled instability in Venezuela and started a new life here with her daughter, a 19-year-old college student in Massachusetts. But earlier this year, the Trump administration announced the end of temporary protected status, or TPS, for Venezuelans and Haitians. TPS allows migrants from countries plagued with war or crises to work in the U.S. and temporarily avoid deportation. Anna says the move prompted her employer at an elder care center to let her go, turning her world upside down.
I got extremely stressed and depressed. Even I didn't want to leave my house.
We are gratified that the Northern District of California Court entered the nationwide injunction.
On Monday, some relief came for Venezuelans like Anna when a judge in California ordered the Trump administration to pause its efforts. The judge did not address Haitians who are scheduled to lose their protected status in August. On Tuesday, a federal judge in Boston declined to rule on DPS, saying the California judge's ruling can stand on its own. Attorneys for local Venezuelan and Haitian advocacy groups say they're ready if the circumstances change.
If there's anything unexpected that comes out of California or the appellate court, we are now prepared to go immediately back to this court to seek the relief that our clients deserve.
And Anna says the pause takes some of the stress off her community.
I'm extremely happy because this means a lot, not only for myself, but for my entire family and my entire community. And it is more of us who are doing the good for the country, and it's only a little bit who are doing the bad.
In Boston, Louisa Moeller, WBZ News.
All right, let's get a look over the city here. The Charles River. Jacob is in this morning with the look at our next weather forecast. Jacob, it's so nice to see the sun yesterday, and at least we're getting some of it right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, soak up the sunshine now because over the next couple of days, we're going to see increasing clouds. Tomorrow, while it's slightly unsettled, it will feature more cloud cover, and it's also going to be milder for tomorrow. But right now, we have kind of filtered sunshine depending on which way you're looking at the horizon. But otherwise, it's a cool start. I think we can all agree that 20s and 30s and early April are a cool start. Back into the mid-30s out towards the Cape and Islands. Our satellite radar shows the thin cloud cover that's around to start out this morning. I expect this to thicken up the later into the afternoon we go and certainly into the overnight. This right here is the leading edge of some milder air. And as this lifts through New England and pushes closer to us, could drop a little bit of wintry mix. Depending on where you are, you could hear a little bit of sleet, a little bit of wet snowflakes falling to the ground. That would be in the overnight hours, Wednesday night into early Thursday. But otherwise, then we start to see the milder air building in for the next couple of days. Today, it's not going to be mild, seasonably cool in the low 40s, starting out with sunshine, a few clouds, then thick clouds.